Dr. Renee, let's say you working at this facility and your colleagues who happen to be employed, they're like, listen, January 13th, we striking, yo. What you doing? What, you coming with us? What you gonna say?
No, I'm not.
You're an independent contractor. You still have to get paid.
It's not even that. It's not that. The question that I would have for them is, why do you think I'm here? I'm here because you have.
Here we go with her whole like.
It's true. Why do you think
Don't
I'm
bend
here?
the spoon.
I'm here
bend
because
around the spoon. This ain't the Matrix, Renee.
There is no spoon.
There is no spoon?
Listen, I'm here because you do have these shitty conditions. You're burnt out. I'm here because of the same reasons that you want to strike.
Folks, your exciting new medical career, it's just been hit with a serious illness or injury that stops you from earning a paycheck just when you need it most. Check out what Jamie Fleischner of Set for Life Insurance said back on episode 176 about having disability insurance early in your career.
The real reason to get it early on is really twofold. One is to protect your insurability. So if you are healthy and you can obtain the coverage, you also pre-approve yourself to be able to buy more in the future. So down the road, as your income does increase, you don't have to answer additional medical questions. All you have to do is show that your income is increased and you can buy more benefits at that time. No medical questions asked.
Protect your income, secure your future. Check out setforlifeinsurance.com.
All right, let's jump into it. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Docs Outside the Box. It's our first recording in January. And to be honest with you guys, it's our first recording in roughly about 2 weeks. We batch our episodes. So there's a lot of episodes that we recorded either late in November or early in December. And, you know, life be lifing. So I'm here with the entire crew, my entire team, that continues to make Docs Outside the Box one of the best podcasts out there. And truly, without this team here, we would not be able to do what we're doing. So I want to give a shout out to what you see actually on my left. If you guys are, I don't know how this is going to edit out, but on my left, I have Kiara. What's up? Welcome to the podcast. I know reluctantly you come on the show. And then we have below, we have Audrey. Audrey is also part of our team. And then we have some straggler. I don't know who she is. She just kind of hacked her way into this. I got to talk to Zoom.
Merry New Year.
And make sure that she.
You know what's funny is he's pointing, and I'm pretty sure that we're all not in the same.
I know, let's do a little Brady bunch.
Hey, and Alfred, somewhere in Mexico City, shout out to you. Alfred, make it so that it's like that, like it's like the Brady Bunch. Like Kiara's here.
Okay, everybody look.
Audrey's here. And Renee's
seen
here.
that Instagram thing where it goes around and it's like, whoever told, I can't remember who it was.
It's Usher.
He was going to be in the middle because he's like, he's on the bottom, like
Usher?
right or something.
What about Usher?
Huh?
What about Usher?
The real
box. Good,
Yeah.
Kiara.
It's a reel where they have like a bunch of celebrities and somebody's like, I wonder who told Usher that he was going to be in the middle, because the whole time it's playing, Usher's like looking up and looking left and looking right and looking down, and he's like really on the bottom right, so there's nobody there.
And this is like at he's on a show, or this is at his concert?
It's like a Sesame Street thing.
I think so. I'll try to find it and send it over.
How recent is this? Because Usher, like being on Sesame Street
a while
recently.
back.
I was about to say, I was like, Usher's probably banned from Sesame Street lately. But
If he's not, he should be.
right? Like, come on, guys. If you know, you know, right? That's how we doing in 2025, excuse me. If you know, you know. So
We Are the Champions. That's the one.
We are the champions. Okay.
it's a song, We Are the Champions?
We are the champions. We are the champions. No time for losers.
Yeah, send it to Alfred so he can put it in there.
But I have to send it to Alfred because it's hilarious.
Oh.
Okay.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Yep. Happy New Year, everybody. Happy New Year to all the listeners. We appreciate all our day ones. And we've gotten a whole bunch of new subscribers on YouTube. And we want to say thank you very much for checking in on YouTube. We're continually trying to grow our YouTube presence and can't do this without you all. So we appreciate that. So with that being said, before we jump into some of the things that we've missed from the end of 2024 and things that are going on right now, I just want to preface this by saying, guys, I don't know if you have noticed, but over the last several weeks, even longer than that, several months, it's been really difficult for me to really concentrate on putting out episodes for the show and really being locked in for the show. And there's so many different things that me and Renee are doing. And I think about when we first started this journey together, paying off our debt, and then eventually starting the podcast in 2016. The first beginning was, let's try to pay off our debt. Then once we started the podcast, it was, okay, once we finish paying off our debt, then let's really get into this locums world. And then once we got into the locums world, it was, okay, we have children, then it's real estate, then let's move back to New Jersey, and then you take on a whole bunch of other things. COVID occurs and so forth. But I think one of the things that I think, once you get to like my age group, and I'm 46, and I think a lot of doctors who come from my demographic that we necessarily don't plan for, or you just never think is going to hit you, is you become part of something called the sandwich generation. And what that means, long story short, is, I'm a husband, I'm taking care of my children, I got my wife, I got responsibilities there, I'm a physician. But the other thing that makes the other part of the sandwich generation is I'm also now having to help take care of my parents. My parents are elderly. My dad is 84 and my mom is 77. And they've done, the yeoman's job of raising me and helping me to become a physician. But one of the things that you just never quite can prepare for is what happens when you have to take care of them. And that's what's been going on over the last several months, I've been primarily taking care of my parents and trying to juggle, take care of kids and be a good doctor and, be a good business person. And sometimes some things fall through the cracks. So I wanted to start off the year by being very honest with you all and letting you guys know that, hey, sometimes shit falls to the ground. You can't do everything. So that's kind of where I've been recently, is just my mind has been, with them and making sure that I'm providing the best environment for them and taking care of them. But also at the same time, being plugged into being a good family man. And then also at the same time, putting out a really quality show. So, if anybody's listening to this show and is going through something similar, come in and write in. You can definitely reach out to us. There's if you go to the show notes, there's a, text us line. There's also a phone number there that you can leave us a voicemail and let us know, if you're going through something similar. But I don't have all the
Text
statistics.
message.
Is it a text message?
Yes.
There's a lot of, I think there's a significant amount of physicians, healthcare professionals who are going through something similar. And sometimes some people say you kind of like suffer in silence. I don't say I'm suffering or anything like that, but it's just kind of one of those things that initially I didn't want to share because it's just like, this is just part of, family. You take care of your family and you kind of move on. And I think Kamala Harris, when she was running for office, she mentioned that, if she got elected, unfortunately she didn't, but if she got elected, one of the priorities that she would have worked on is transitioning some of that Medicare dollars and even Medicaid dollars to making it easier for people who are working class, who are in the sandwich generation, to have more options, to have more, ability to take care of family members in a way that, is, what's the word I want to use, in a decent fashion without necessarily having to deplete your family's funds to go into Medicaid, or having to put, them in a nursing home or do something that you just never had to anticipate. So if you guys are listening and you're going through something similar, go ahead and write to us and let us know. Because I think it's a very important topic that we don't often get a chance to talk about. And we definitely don't talk about, we've never talked about here on the show. So that's what's been going on with me. We have a plan now, between me and my three older sisters, we have a plan to provide care for my dad and my mom and stuff, but it's not perfect, but it's just one of those things that we go through. I remember when I first started working, I remember like my partners who were older than me, they were going through the process of actually burying their parents, right? But because I was younger, I didn't quite get that. And at the time, my parents were still, my dad was driving in his 70s, my dad was driving up until his 80s. But now it's like, wait, now I really got to provide a significant amount of time to take care of them. So this is something that I'm definitely new to going through. I've been scouring the internet, how to, make it better. It's one of the hardest things is to figure out all the regulations and all the programs that are available. There are a lot of programs, but it's a lot of times based off of what your parents have in terms of their retirement, what they have in terms of a house, what they have in terms of just any type of financial, if they're not completely broke, a lot of times you don't really qualify for a lot of programs, which can be very frustrating. So that's something
A question for you.
Hmm.
Being that you have the background that you have and Renee has the background that she has, how does that differ knowledge-wise? Like knowing the information that you know with your parents, does it make it easier or harder?
I think it makes it harder. So I leave it to like this. Like I remember like when I was in residency, like there was a slew of people who I was taking care of like the last year of my training who were my dad's age, and they had developed like colon cancer, had to have emergency surgery, and they ended up passing away, unfortunately. And it just finally clicked to me. I was like, wait, these are my dad's age. They never had a colonoscopy. And I never reached out to my dad to say, Dad, did you ever get a colonoscopy? So I called my dad. This is like 2011. I was like, Dad, did you ever get a colonoscopy? He's like, no, not that I can think of. And I was like, wow, like, Dad, you need to get a colonoscopy. And I rushed him and urged him. And later on that year, he got it. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that like you could be so into like taking care of other people that you're not necessarily taking care of your own family. And I think now that, we're going through this and I'm aware of like do not resuscitate, DNRs, DNIs, advanced directives, dementia, all these different things that we see on a daily basis with trauma. When you look back and you're like, wow, like this is actually happening to my family. When you have, I take care of patients who fall down and they develop traumatic brain injuries. And, one of the hardest things is deciding, should they go back home or should they go to a nursing home or should they go to, a rehab facility? These are discussions that, very easily I can have. But when you have to have that with your own family, it makes it very hard. It's very difficult to take the intellectual side out of things and really just focus on the visceral, like emotional, like that's my dad, that's daddy, or that's my mom, that's mommy.
No, that's the
That-
part you're
that-
supposed to take out. No? I thought you're supposed to take out the emotion.
Well,
Right.
I think that's what makes it hard though, right? Is that when you are looking at patients, then yeah, you try to take some of the emotion out of it so that you can do what you have to do. The problem is that your family, they're not your patients. And so if you try to intellectualize everything with your family, you're missing a vital part of what they need in order to be cared for. They need you emotionally. They have doctors, but they need you emotionally. It doesn't mean that you're not looking and you're not aware of what's going on and that if something is not right that you're not going to say it. But you can't approach your family in the same way that you would approach your patients, in a lot of cases anyway. You can't approach them the same because your family relies on you in different ways than your patient relies on you. And that's kind of a discussion that Nee and I have had offline, just kind of talking about, how we care for our parents and, making plans for them. And, with older people, we know it's very, very difficult for older people to either, lose autonomy, lose their faculties, lose their assets, or have someone, now responsible for taking care of their assets, taking care of them on a daily basis, and them not quite always knowing or being in the mix of what's going on because they can't necessarily, they can't necessarily do that just based on their capabilities. And so when you try to intellectualize certain things, it comes off as being harsh, cold, deceptive, right? Like older people are very sensitive to people potentially taking advantage of them, including family members sometimes. And so when you just approach it as an intellectual, just like knowledge base, like, oh, this is what it is because I know I've seen it before, this is what it is. It's like, you don't really look like you care about me is what they're thinking. You don't really look like you care about me. You look like you have an agenda. And it's like, you might not have an agenda, but removing some of that, just intellectual, facade, if you will, removing some of that and replacing it with some emotion actually is not just helpful to your family member, but it's helpful to you too. Because as these things are going on, you're slowly grieving, you're slowly mourning the changes that you're seeing in your parents, and eventually they'll be gone. And then you'll be left to mourn, only to mourn. Right. And so now the question becomes, well, when they are gone, are you going to have the regret that you didn't have more of those emotional moments, that you didn't say the things that you really should have or wanted to say, but you were so busy trying to intellectualize things that, you just kept it moving. You just going through the motions. So I think it's harder for those reasons.
I'm following what you're saying now. So it's better to apply the emotion to family versus treating them as though they were a patient, even though you have the knowledge and the experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a tendency to do that too. So like
Big time.
I have a tendency to just keep it moving, and that's one of the lessons that I'm learning right now is, like Renee said, like they already have their doctors. They just need a son, right? And although I tend to be very, like, I got to have a plan, to make sure what's the next step to anticipate, there's some blind spots that I have. So that's the part that is very difficult, is kind of being a son as well as kind of helping to, like, all right, mom, dad, I got this part of the race. Let me help you get, to a place that you guys will feel very comfortable. But also at the same time, like Renee said, it's like, sometimes with dementia, you may not know, or they just, they sometimes become very suspicious, so it's very tough. It's a catch-22.
Yeah. The paranoia with dementia is a lot. So my grandmother has it, so I completely understand. She swears that I'm out to get her with the CIA from a whole different state. I told my mom that I was trying to get her money, and I'm like,
yeah.
So the paranoia that sets in for them, it's scary to watch. That's why I had asked, as a doctor, does it make it different? Because you have the knowledge. I don't have the knowledge that you have. I don't have the experience that you have. So I just wondered if the lines get blurred a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, we see this in more than just like, elderly or end of life care. We see this actually. We were just kind of talking previously, before we started the recording, about childbirth, right? And childbirth is also a place where it's like, dude, like, I need you to be my husband, not the doctor, right? Although I always joke with Nee because his OB rotation in med school was a joke. I think our baby was the first baby he'd ever seen born. Admit it.
It was subpar, but you know what? I got my degree. Y'all can't get it back. But
your rotation was subpar. It was almost non-existent.
And you didn't help deliver? any of the kids?
Yeah.
What?
On paper, I did.
Okay, on paper.
Wait, help deliver my kids?
Yes, your kids.
Yes, I was there.
I would not.
I was there.
No.
No. I didn't ask if you were there. I asked if you helped to deliver them.
Yes, I helped. I held the leg up.
He's like,
Okay.
yes, I was the dad in that role.
Yes. Well, I've seen where dads haven't been dads, and then they become part of an outcome that they wish they weren't a part of. Right. So I remember there was one resident who his wife was delivering. His wife wasn't an OB. She wasn't in medicine, but he was. And so it was kind of clear that the baby's heart rate was not doing what it was supposed to be doing. So heart rate kept dipping down, long points of not recovering, but then recovering and then dipping down again, where it was like, look, she's so far from 10 centimeters. This baby is eventually just going to conk out. Like, the baby's not going to be able to recover much longer from this. There's just way too much stress on the baby. And so he kept pushing, like, no, let's just see if she will, continue to dilate. Let's see if she'll continue to dilate. Well, whatever her dilation was, it just wasn't fast enough to be like, all right, push and get this baby out. So finally, he allows them to, examine her and then go to C-section.
So wait, just to clarify, the father is a doctor.
The father's an OB.
Is an OB. The wife is not.
The wife is not in medicine.
And he's
running the ship. Right? He's running the ship, interfering with the care that her doctor is trying to give her because he knows too much, right? He knows too much. The problem is that he has emotion and intellect attached to this woman, to this process that is about to happen with this baby. And so between the emotion of, I don't want her to undergo C-section, and the intellectual piece of, because I know, how brutal C-sections can potentially be, and I know what complications can happen with C-sections, and I know potentially she might be doomed to, repeat C-sections in the future. It was his first baby. Then he had that intellect, but also it was like, oh, but this is my wife. Had it been any other patient, he'd have been like, yeah, she needs a C-section. He would have taken out a C-section.
Is there a part where you, as the doctor or your team, was like, because for me, what I am always doing, if I get that situation, because we get that a lot where, we'll have patients who are taken care of, and then we'll have family members who are either doctors or, very rarely doctors, but like nurses or other healthcare professionals and so forth. And, when they start to direct care, a lot of times I'll just center it back to the patient and start talking to the patient. So did you guys talk to the wife and say, okay, this is what's going on. What do you want to do? Like, how did that go?
So the attending that was on was not that kind of attending.
I like how Renee has these, like, she's having like this mental monologue in her head, and she's like, and she like chuckles.
Yes. You see the blurry lines?
Yes.
Yeah, the attending that was on was not that kind of attending. Let's just but he I'll start there. Was not that kind of attending. Eventually, he put his foot down and said, no, your wife needs a C-section. And so they, transport her to the operating room.
And just to clarify, the father, again, is a resident. He's not an attending, right?
He's a resident, but he's a senior resident. Senior residents, when you're a senior resident, you get away with a lot of stuff. So.
Okay. All right. Keep going.
But anyway,
We
eventually,
listen and we don't judge.
now we judge.
Hey, yo, guys,
No, I know. I see
that
all
is
the
the theme.
judgment.
That is the theme. That is the theme, guys, for 2025.
No, it's
Listen
not.
and we don't jump.
We listen and we gonna judge. We
judge.
can
Yo,
and we will.
Speaking of
That's
such,
my
yo,
thing
that is
for
real
2025.
quick, before you finish that story, guys. Like everybody's listening. Like we are, like that's what I'm saying. Like we missed out on this in late 2024, right? Like we listen to, we don't judge, but eventually, either in this podcast or in future podcasts, we gonna talk. We gonna have a session where we talk about this because this is amazing. It's an amazing the challenges, craze. I think me and you, Renee, we need to do that because there's a lot of judging on your part, and there's a lot of
Yeah.
things I need to get off my chest.
We
I
can't.
need to tell
So
you.
we listen and we don't judge. And my response, remember, we are call and response kind of people. We listen and we don't judge. And my response is, we can and we will.
Mm.
Okay.
Well, anyway, get to the point of the story real quick. Come on, because this is getting...
Anyway,
all right,
quickly.
all right.
Anyway, they take her to the operating room, and now the resident starts trying to scrub in.
What? Yes,
He's at the scrub sink. And the attending finally was like, what are you doing? Like,
You gotta
what
draw the
are you
line somewhere. Like,
But that's over. That's over. Like, excuse me, but
But
to me,
people do that.
that's
People do
pathologic
it.
at that point. That's pathologic at that point.
I actually wonder because obviously I was the patient at the time. I was
Mhm.
on the table of C-section. When they bring dad in for a C-section,
Mhm.
and I know he was wearing the whole whatever. He doesn't have to like wash his hands and whatnot. You just got to
No.
keep him above a
Yeah.
certain point, right? Above the okay.
Yeah. So when we bring fathers in, they just have to go behind to where the anesthesiologist is because that area is not sterile.
Okay.
So he doesn't have to wash his hands. But he's at the scrub sink and he starts scrubbing. And the attending's like,
Man, if you
all
don't
right,
get your ass
this is
out
it.
here, man.
This is it. But,
Yeah.
the problem also was that once the baby came out, we do something called cord gases. If the baby, especially I should say, if the baby isn't very vigorous when it comes out, if it's not crying, it's kind of, floppy or, it's just not vigorous. And the cord gases were lower than normal, which makes you start thinking like, oh, does my baby have, some sort of brain injury or whatever? And it's like, see, you don't want to be a part of that outcome. You don't want to be the person who now has to think, man, if I had not delayed that C-section, potentially could I have caused my child harm? So this is, these are the kinds of things that you have to think about as a physician
Yeah.
who also is now the patient or the patient support system, that you don't, you want to be there to advocate, but you don't want to overstep and potentially be a part of a bad outcome that happens, because now you got to think, well, what was my role in this bad outcome?
Yeah,
thankfully,
I could think
I
that
think daughter was
he
okay,
may have a
but-
lot of regret. He may have a lot of regret possibly and
Yeah.
stuff. But I mean,
Yeah.
I think I appreciate that example. That example is really extreme though, because it's like, damn it, like, if you put that in any other specialty, like that's like, a family member trying, or this doctor trying to scrub into a family member's case. It's like, you just can't do that. Get out of
You
here.
can't do that.
know? So
Is there anything that says you can't do that? Like legally, I guess.
I don't know. I don't know if it's just one of those things that it's just kind of like,
It's a
I don't know if
an
there's a legal thing
unwritten
that you can't.
rule.
Yeah. Never
Okay.
treat, because
Unwritten
I think we
rule.
all in the specialty, or I think we all in the field are just like, yeah, we don't want to treat our family members. Like if it's like minor things, like they have a cold or,
Yeah.
something that's very minor, like, yeah, whatever. But like an actual procedure on a family member, or, actually guiding them through something major that they're going through that you're in charge of, that's a lot of pressure. And I think there's always this just unsaid rule of never treat your family, right? You just get somebody else to treat them for you. And then, you're there to provide advice. You're there to just make sure the person who, you've sent them to is doing the right things and so forth. But
Right.
I think that most professionals know, don't cross the line and just let
Yeah.
somebody else take care of that. Like if something were to happen to my children, like I would not want to be the person who scrubbed in taking care of my children. I would
Right.
never want to do that.
That's
Right.
fair. That's fair.
Right.
I could see why.
No matter where you are in your career, you've seen patients your age or younger get seriously injured, have a long-term illness, or even have a mental health issue that affects their ability to work. Now, what if that was you? No, for real, what if that was you? Without disability insurance, how are you going to replace your paycheck? In episode 176, Jamie Fleischner of Set for Life Insurance explains why the best time to buy disability insurance is during your residency.
Most physicians acquire their disability policies during residency, and there's several reasons. First of all, when you're younger, you're able to obtain the insurance because they ask you a whole host of medical history. And so you usually don't get healthier over time. Usually you get less healthy over time. So when you're healthy, it's easier to acquire the coverage. Number two, it's also less expensive because it's based on your age and your health. You're not getting younger or healthier over time. So you're at the ideal time. The earlier you get it and the younger you are, the less expensive it's going to be.
So whether you're a resident or you're an attending, it's never too late to protect your income. Renee and I, we use Set for Life Insurance to find a disability policy that fit our needs and budget. So what are you waiting for? Check out setforlifeinsurance.com. Once again, that's setforlifeinsurance.com.
So we did have a listener question since we're already on the topic of OBGYN.
Mm-hmm.
And Michelle had asked, she said she met Nee at the IHCV gala, and he told her about the podcast, and she's been listening. She was one of Dr. Aiken's fellows, and she works at Virtua now.
Mm-hmm.
She's loving the podcast. And Renee, she knows a lot of your advice is geared toward younger pre-med resident type folks. But she says, oh my gosh, I'm like, wait, I think I missed that in life. And yes, so thank you. Also, I did locums when I was a general OBGYN and liked it, but I have wondered about doing it as a gynecologist oncologist. Because she did locums, she gets hounded all the time. But I just wonder about continuity of care and how it would feel if my patients weren't cared for the way I would want them to be cared for while I'm there. And just like the personal connection with taking care of patients for years. She wants your thoughts on that.
So locums.
So she's done locums. So she's done locum. She's done locums
Yes.
before as a general OB. It seems like her
OB.
question is, how do you do locums as someone who does really major things? Like, how do you do locums with someone who does gynec, right? Like cancer and so forth. Because if she's done locums as an OB, it's not that big of a deal, you would think. But now that she's doing gynec, it's like, I'm assuming that's why she's asking that question.
Yeah, first and foremost, I have to say that I don't know, and I personally have never seen gynec locums.
Yeah.
So I don't know, Audrey, maybe if you want to look up and type in locums and put in gynec and see what you come up with, because that would be very interesting to me. Because gynecologic oncology is something that, there is a lot of continuity of care in terms of gynec, right? Because you're seeing patients, you're potentially taking out their tumors by operating on them. And then, you are...
Wait a second. Hold on. I'm learning something right now.
Yeah.
I didn't know that you saw someone. I didn't know that there was further specialty. I didn't know you could. I thought your if my gynecologist found something in there that could potentially be cancerous, tumor, whatever. I didn't know that I had to be referred to someone who specialized in. I thought she would take care of that. Or
No. There are gynecologic oncologists, meaning they take care of gynecologic cancers. So ovarian cancer, fallopian tube cancer, uterine cancers, vaginal cancers, vulvar cancers. So, all of down there cancers,
okay.
cervical cancer, all of those. So there are gynecologic specialists who do an extra 3 years. And it's funny because there's a saying that they do 3 years to learn 5 operations. But essentially, gynecologic oncologists are really badass surgeons. Like, really, really, I mean, just amazing surgeons who then involve themselves in the chemotherapy, radiation therapy, and follow-up care that patients get after, you know, they've kind of gone through a gynecologic cancer. So as a gynecologist, if there are if there is locums for gynecological oncologists, I could only imagine that those would be long-term stints,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I
right?
was thinking the same
So,
thing.
for
9
example,
months, 1 year, or something
right,
like that.
exactly. For example, maybe a facility loses a gyn onc, right? Because of whatever, they moved on or they're retiring or whatever. So they need someone to take care of their patients, but for a longer period of time. So like when I moved to Idaho back in 2010, 2011, or 2011, 2012 actually. When I moved to Idaho, I was a
Why'd you
long-term
move there?
locum.
I was
Huh?
about to ask the same thing because
Why'd
who
you move
moves
there?
to Idaho?
That's what I'm
I
saying.
did. I had a fabulous time. And let me tell you, I know the difference between a black bear and a grizzly bear. Okay.
But why did you move to Idaho?
I moved to Idaho to do locums.
All I'm gonna say is that if you had stayed on this side, you wouldn't have to know the difference between the bears.
That's what I was about to say. You want to get into what made you go to Idaho? Or is that a different episode? We listen.
What do you think made me go to Idaho?
I don't know. Maybe you couldn't hack it in the East Coast or something. I don't know.
Get out of here. He thinks it has something to do with him because that was the year that he broke up with me.
You should have thrown him to the bear.
Whatever, because he came out to Idaho, and I should have thrown him out to the bear
guys,
at
don't
that
you hate-
time.
Bro, I'm gonna let you.
It was
I'm gonna
a
let you
lure.
cook.
Come
Renee,
out
I'm
to
gonna let you
Idaho, trying to get back
let
with
you
me.
cook. But guys, don't you hate when like people go someplace and they've been there for like maybe 3 months or 6 months, and then they come back and they think they know everything? It's like you went out to Idaho and that's fine. But like in 3 months or 6 months, there's like you don't know the difference between a black bear and a grizzly bear.
I do know the difference
Like I don't
between a
think
black
like
bear.
she's
and a
coming
grizzly
out here
bear.
like giving all this advice. Oh, if a polar bear comes, like duck under a car. It's like
Polar
shut up.
bears in
You're
Idaho.
from Brooklyn, New
Different
York.
continent.
You from Brooklyn, New York. Like you ain't learned nothing. Like just relax. All right. Someone told you something, and
Don't
then
say nothing when a grizzly bear comes to you and you don't know what to do.
Do you know what to do?
I do know what to do.
What do you do?
You know what? Move to Idaho and then you'll find out.
Anyway, go finish your story. Finish your story, because let's go.
Anyway, to keep answering Dr. Michelle's question, first of all, thank you, Dr. Michelle, for submitting that question, because that's a really good one. But if, like I said, if there were gyn-onc positions, I would imagine that they would be long-term, right? So they would be 5, 6 months, 10 months.
Or it could be weekends.
Say again?
It could be weekends.
Hold on. Why are you stealing my thunder, though? Why are you stealing my thunder? Or, right? Or the option could also be doing weekends. So the reason that I say that is because if it's going to be long term, it's usually because they need someone in their offices, right? In their clinics, actually seeing patients, doing the follow-up visits and things like that, as well as operating on those patients. But I don't think that it's ever going to be like we just need you for a week.
Yeah, it's not.
Or we need you for 2 weeks because someone went out on maternity leave, right? Because that would lend to, all right, well, now you're seeing patients in the office and you're potentially taking them to the operating room, but you're not completing the care. Versus weekends, which is you're probably not going to be operating. You're probably just going to be seeing patients who are already in the hospital, whose plan of care is already set out. You just have to continue with that plan of care and make sure that the patients are stable, or you are admitting patients who might have complications from their cancers or from their surgeries or from their chemo and radiation, right?
Mhm.
Not necessarily operating, just kind of keeping everything at bay until the main gyn-onc comes back and is able to continue on. That's what I would see.
Audrey, did you find for sure if there is anything?
Yeah, there are actually a lot of job openings for the same. So, but it's on an ongoing basis. So you attend to patients on an ongoing basis. So yeah,
This is locums.
yeah, locum tenens, gynecologists. Yeah.
I would just say this, like Dr. Michelle, like it's coming. There's just like an overcorrection, and whenever you have one way of doing things that people are really upset about, you know, whether it's doctors or other healthcare providers, if there's one way of doing things and they're not happy with it, there's going to be an overcorrection. And you know, like we do locums, and sometimes we can be locums fanatics. I don't think everybody's going to go to locums, but I do think that in some form or fashion, every specialty can do locums. And I think in general, people, doctors, professionals, they want their independence, they want to be paid well, and they want to be in control of how they practice. And things that we never considered, like even cardiothoracic surgery, right? Like, is this my heart surgeon? Is it just here for the weekend? It possibly yes, that might occur, right? The way in which things are going with the way how people want to live their lives and have their careers going. Some people want to have a situation where like maybe they are doing heart surgery for Monday through Friday, and maybe they need weekends off, and someone may have to cover, and maybe there's a major complication that occurs over the weekend, and that person who's ever there doing locums may have to do it. Same thing with gyne. It happens in trauma, it happens in OB, it happens in medicine, it happens in neurosurgery, it happens in all the different types of specialties. I think the most important thing is just like, what are you going to add and what are you going to bring in to make sure that the patient has really good outcomes? And I think for me, because I practice with because I do trauma and I do it in an independent contracting fashion, but I do it for like a week at a time and then I go, I try to be very responsible and very realistic about what I can offer a patient. If I know that a patient needs a major operation and I won't be there to complete it, or I won't be there to see them to the finish line, then there's two options that I have. One is, I make sure that my partner can at least complete the job, right? Finish the next surgery if it needs to be done, or at least make sure that my partners can finish the care of this patient if they need that, or I transfer them to a higher level of care, right? Because I tend to work at level 2 trauma centers or smaller hospitals. So if I need to send them to a larger facility that has, way more resources than I have, then I tend to do that also. So I think that it just looks different, but I think in the realm of gynec or surgical oncology or anything that's related to oncology where you need to have a long-term relationship, I think that you're going to see locums in that realm also, because I think that that's just the way how we're moving with doctors and healthcare providers with their lifestyle. And I think even just when you have a situation where you have things corporatized, it has to be a situation where, in the corporatization of healthcare, you have to have a situation where people can be plugged in and plugged out, which leads us to our next topic. I don't know when we're going to get to that, but, we're talking about doctors striking and so forth. When you have, things so corporatized and people get plugged in and plugged out and cogs in the wheel, well, even doctors who are not normally thought of as cogs in the wheels, they're going to act like a cog in the wheel, and they're going to strike like other employees because you treat them like an employee. So that's what I have to say about that.
Yeah. And I think, there's a component of having to trust the system to some extent. Because even in private practice, you can't be there 24/7. You can't. There has to be a point at which there's a handoff. And we know that as much as we like to take care of our patients and make sure that we're doing everything that we can for our patients, you can't do that for 100% of your patients all the time. So there has to be a handoff, and you have to be able to trust your partners to be able to do, what they think is best. Not always what you think is best, right? But what they think is best, because they're not you. And trust that will yield at least a good outcome for the patients, the best outcome possible sometimes.
I think if you the way how I look at it when I tell patients this is like they'll be like, oh man, you're leaving and someone else is gonna take care. I'm like, listen, like we all practice medicine 99.9% the same. We all practice it the same. It's just that 0.01% or 0.1% that is different. And the difference is so infinitesimal in comparison to the overall care of what you got. Like we all think that you need an operation, or we all think that you don't need an operation.
Is that 0.1% me? Is that 0.1%? Is that based on like your personal views, your personal perspective?
No, it's like things that you were taught in residency that we call you've heard of dogma, right? Like things that we do just because we just do it, right? Like, and even as physicians, there are things that we do that have no scientific basis whatsoever, but we do it because that's what we were taught in our respective residency program, right? So for example, let's say Renee trained at an OB program and I trained at another OB program. To be honest, the way how we take care of people is going to be exactly the same, but there's going to be like small little minor things that like she may do that I may do. But when you look at things overall, it doesn't really make a big difference, right? It's all the same thing. It's just that she just does something a little bit different than I do. But overall, we know that this patient needs to be delivered. This patient needs to be C-section. This patient may need antibiotics. Well, where you may see a difference is she may use a different antibiotic than I may use a different antibiotic, right? Or she may take her staples out like a day later than I would. For me, that's what I've always seen as the biggest difference you see. Nothing major.
See, I'm gonna answer the question a little bit differently. I think the answer is absolutely 100% yes. That percentage, that small percentage, is actually based on quite a number of things. It might be based in some of what you mentioned, Nee, right? Like, yeah, we just do things differently. But I think that there's also the element of, one, your personal preferences, your biases, your knowledge base, right? Because if Dr. Nee is taking care of me and Dr. Nee is up on the latest X, Y, and Z, but Dr. X is old school and does stuff the really old school way in ways that, you know, haven't proven to be up with the times and have actually, or is just really antiquated in the way that Dr. X practices, which might prove to have worse outcomes than more modern stuff, then yeah, I think that actually does make a difference, right? So, even when, let's talk about like appendicitis, right? There are now guidelines that suggest that for certain patients, antibiotics would be appropriate. If a person is not a great candidate for surgery or just doesn't want surgery for whatever reason, and they are a good candidate for antibiotics, but Dr. X is like, nope, when I trained, everybody got a surgery, right? Everybody got surgery for appendicitis. Well, that's a huge difference. The other thing that I would say also is your approach, right, to patients. How do you speak to patients? How do you educate patients? Are you capable of educating patients? Because there are doctors who are not capable of educating patients. They come at patients with all these scientific, well, there are two schools of thought, blah, blah, blah. It's like nobody want to hear that. People want to hear, what is wrong with me? What's going to happen? What are you going to do? How are you going to fix this? That's what people want to know. They want to know that you're compassionate. There are doctors who are not compassionate. They are very cold, intellectual, and they just tell you what they got to say. Oh, I'm sorry, you got 3 days to live. Bye-bye. And then that's it. And it's like, I don't want to hear that. So I think that, that small percentage is where the meat is at. Like that's where it is. All that 99% stuff is great because the 99%, if all of that is the same, that's not the thing that's going to, change your outcome. It's that small 1%. That's the thing that's going to change your outcome. And unfortunately, when you switch doctors, if Dr. Nee goes off and, somebody else is coming on, and Nee knows this, that he's seen that 1%, it makes a difference.
That's where that 1% falls. And a change of doctor is where the 1%
Yes.
falls. So you're both not wrong. You're both knees falls into like knees response falls into what your response was.
I'm
what?
So my colleagues, man, let's move on, yo. My colleagues be listening to the show. Right? They do. Like, oh, I listened to your show. I'm like, oh shit, really? Ooh, when did I sign out?
No, I'll tell you. Wait, I'll tell you a quick story.
No, we tired of stories, man. Come on now. Your stories are long as hell, yo.
I'll tell you a quick story about when I was in Idaho. I was in Idaho and I was taking care. I don't know. I had like a teen clinic in Idaho, teen pregnancy clinic. I loved my teens. And so I had this one teenager. I just found a letter actually that she wrote the other day while I was cleaning some stuff out. But while I was there, I delivered her and I told her, I'll deliver you, but I had to go away that weekend. So I ended up delivering her on a Friday evening. And by Saturday, I had to go. So I had to hand her off. Now, before I left, I knew that the colleague I was handing her off to was that 1% difference was in the way he was going to speak to her about birth control. So I spoke to her about birth control, and then we would continue the conversation when she came back for her, for her visit. And I said to my colleague, you don't have to talk to her about birth control because I already talked to her about birth control. We got a plan. It's okay. Don't talk to her about birth control. Heart, lungs, uterus, legs. Those are the things you need to examine. Do not talk to her about birth control. So what does he do? He goes in and he talks to her about birth control in the most asinine, paternalistic way that you could ever imagine. A 50-something-year-old, very traditional man coming to talk to a 16-year-old girl about birth control. And that was the letter that I found that she wrote. It was a complaint. But that 1% right there, right? Because he didn't do anything different. He discharged her to home on day 2. Didn't do anything different for her. But that 1%, that was the difference. So.
Let me see.
So much to unpackage here.
There's a lot to unpack, but
I do want us to acknowledge, right before we move on, I do want us to acknowledge a comment that was made on Instagram by Via Dolls. Just a quick shout out for her.
Yay.
That name sounds familiar.
Yes, we're going to do a quick shout out for her. Her comment was, she's been following since med school. She completed residency in 2022 and has only been doing locums as an attending. And so she found that you guys provide extremely valuable advice as she's still learning and navigating this territory. Thank you for your continued dedication to educating the community in a transparent fashion. And thank you for exposing us to the many possibilities that exist out there for those of us that in medicine who want to do the unconventional. Bless up.
Woohoo! Alfred, give a little woohoo! Thank you, Via Dolls.
We appreciate that. That makes us feel good because I think so. Real quick story on my part. So last night I was waiting to do a case.
The story.
I was waiting to do a case, and a urologist comes in. He is from New York, practiced in all 5 boroughs of New York. So we kind of connected there. But he's older than me. He's maybe 20 years older than me, and he does locums for urology. So we're chatting about, what it's like to do locums for urology. And, speaking of like having like a long-term relationship with patients and so forth, he covers the ER and he doesn't cover clinic. He just covers like the emergencies that occur with urology. So we're just chatting and he's like, yeah, you're fairly young. Like, how long have you been doing locums? I was like, I've been doing locums since I finished training. And I've done it throughout, even being employed, I would do locums on the side. And now I'm 100% locums. And I'll be very honest with you, I would not go back. Right. And he's like, man, he told me, he's like, it's really amazing to see that you are very young and you've already come to that, analysis. he said, like, I'm in my 60s and I just started doing locums 2 years ago.
Oh,
And the way how it occurred was I got to a certain age, and according to that age, according to the bylaws of the hospital that I used to work at, I don't have to take call anymore. Well, he said, well, after, COVID occurred and left, like they kind of changed the bylaws where it wasn't always just purely based on age. Now they have to, like, the medical staff has to vote to see that you don't have to take call anymore. And he's like, well, just, put it to a vote and just let me not take call anymore. Well, they put it to a vote and one person said, yeah, he lost by one vote. And he's like, I don't care. I'm not taking call. And it just became this back and forth thing where eventually he ended up signing a letter of resignation and he left. But he says, look at that. I'm a guy in my early 60s. I left practice. I left New York, and now I'm doing locums. But my wife says I'm happier. We make just as much, and I'm home more. And I'll be honest with you, I'm less, irritable, and I don't have to be in clinic all the time and stuff. Now, I'm not saying that, doing locums is the panacea, but I think it's just really fascinating to, we're recording this episode and, we get that comment. And then I had that conversation late last night, with a urologist, but it bees like that. It bees like that. And I was telling him the same thing that, hey, like, when you have docs in a certain position, or if you have people who are in a certain position and they don't like it, they're going to overcorrect, right? You see that in college sports, you see that in music, you see that in, a whole bunch of different industries where people just say, look, I'm going to go completely to the other side. And until we're able to meet in the middle, this is the way it's going to be. So very interesting conversation. But Viadol's, I think I actually know who that person is now. I think they've written to us before. Is it Viadollz?
Yes.
Yeah, I think they've written to us before. But shout out to you. And we're glad that you enjoy the show. And we're glad that you're continuing to do locums. And as we always say, we do locums until it doesn't work for us. So we're not like, completely.
So I know we touched up earlier on the pending strike that's coming up. The strike is on the 13th. So Monday. What are your thoughts on it? And my question also is, would that happen, or would it affect you if you work locums?
So let me just give the audience a little bit of a rundown. So there are actually four hospitals across New York City. And they're in Queens, the Bronx, Manhattan, and one in Brooklyn. So it's almost every single borough. And there's something called, I think it's called New York City Hospital, Health and Hospitals or something like that, which is a contractor for the public hospitals that employ the doctors who then work in these public hospitals, right? Because as if they were public employees, they actually would not be allowed to strike. So what's going on is that the doctors, of course, are burnt out. They are, they feel like they are underpaid. They feel like their underpayment is not allowing for recruitment and retention of quality doctors. So there's probably a lot of turnover ongoing, so that the doctors that remain end up having to work longer hours. So they are striking so that they can get better compensated, they can get better benefits. I'm sure, with compensation or with better compensation and better benefits, their thought process is, well, you'll be able to attract more quality doctors, and have doctors stay in this very high cost of living area called New York City, right? Because, that's the point, right? If you don't have enough money, then how can you really say that you're going to stay at the job that you're at? So that's what's going on. And they're planning on striking unless there is a deal made.
Are these residents at all, or these
January
are just
13th. Say again?
Are these residents, or are these like
These are doctors.
attendings? Okay.
Yeah. These are attendings.
Okay.
And across the city, it's over 1,000 doctors who are planning to strike.
These are all employed doctors
Employed doctors.
who they work for somebody, and just like any other company, if a group of people were to work for a company, they would strike.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, I just for me,
Yeah.
I think we're at the point now where it's like I think this is a big deal. I think that, you know, I haven't read what they're saying, but if what you're telling me is true, like these are reasons to fight for, whether it means strike or whatever it may be. But these are issues that we see at a lot of different places where you don't have enough staff because you have a facility that doesn't want to pay the staff, or they don't want to pay for, you know, help and so forth. And as a result, you get a lot of turnover. People are like, look, I can only work here for a certain period of time, and then I get burnt out. I got to go someplace else. And then the people who are stuck there, you know, if you can't recruit anymore, the patients are still coming. So now you're doing more with less.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an issue. But I think when you have docs or professionals when you treat them like employees, this is what employees do. They
Right.
strike. And I think that we all in general, I think the public in general is going to have to learn to accept this as this is going to be the reality. It's going to happen more and more. And this is just the way how it is. And I wish the doctors good luck, you know, because I think that, you know, when you have this big of a strike, more than likely the state is going to get involved. Like the governor is going to get involved.
The mayor actually has already gotten involved.
Yeah. Well,
Mayor Adams requests Doctors Council and healthcare partners to engage in mediation to avert the strike at the 4 hospitals.
Yeah. Oh,
So
sorry.
they're trying to stop it.
yeah.
I was going to say it's actually 1 hospital in Queens, 2 in the Bronx, and 1 in Brooklyn, not 1 in Manhattan. But yeah, I mean, I think that this is, you know, a really important, you know, point at which I think we are in history, because we're seeing doctor strikes more often. We just saw a doctor strike, last year?
We saw multiple doctor strikes last year.
Right. Multiple doctor strikes. And these are not just resident strikes. Now we're talking about attending strikes, right? So this is kind of, now it's running the gamut, right? It's going
And you've seen it
throughout.
overseas. It happens
Yeah,
overseas
and
also.
it's happening overseas. So we are seeing more and more that, you know, what
Didn't it happen in
used to
Kenya?
be- Huh?
It did happen in Kenya.
Yeah.
Yeah, it happened. And until the government like bows to what their demands are, because you can't spend all these years in med school only to be paid mediocre. So yeah.
Right. And so, you know, what we're seeing now is what used to be considered like, oh, you know, doctors, we are not blue collar workers. It's kind of like what Nee said. You treat people like blue collar workers, they will do what blue collar workers do, and blue collar workers union, and they strike. And this is what they do. And so we're seeing even more doctors' unions pop up, which is probably why we're also starting to see more strikes, because people are feeling like I'm a blue collared worker as a physician. Now, to your question, Kiara, as a locums, right? You wouldn't have this problem.
You got to be careful though. Yeah, you got to be careful because, you know, when they're striking, and the question is, if you come in as a locums, or if you're a locums during this whole process, are you technically what do you call those people who bust what do you call it?
Yeah, a line cross or picket or
line cross.
Yeah, whatever they call it. Yeah, you cross the picket line.
Yeah, are you technically crossing the picket line when, let's say, you're working there as a locums and you just stay and keep working as a locums? Because technically, if you're locums, you can't.
But you're not subject to these conditions.
You can't strike. You're not striking. Do you strike on behalf? Like that's a lot to consider here. I don't know.
Right.
know.
But if
You're
it's
not
personal, right? Where do you lie personally? Personally, morally, do you side with the union based on the conditions, or do you essentially side with yourself, because you're not really siding with the hospital because you're only there temporarily, right?
Well, not always, right?
This
Because
is
Nee's
good.
been at his hospital for 4 years. But what I think, it's not so much about I think it's not a who you're siding with issue, more than under what conditions are you working? Right? Under what conditions are you working? Because the reality is, as a locums, you've kind of set the example for those employed physicians to be like, if you don't want these problems, here's a solution. It may not be the only solution, but here's a solution, right? That if you were all really concerned about all of this, instead of striking, what you would all do is quit and say, rehire me as an independent contractor. Now that, I might get shot for that one. But but if you really want to strike, like that's how you actually strike, right?
Because if you think
strike
about it,
means
the
to hit.
hospital needs you more than you need it.
And that's the thing. And that's what doctors don't realize. Doctors don't realize that the hospital needs them, needs us more than we need them.
So basically what you're saying is if you create a relationship where you are no longer an employee, you always keep the hospital on its tiptoes that, okay, we have to always maintain a positive relationship with this group. And that positive relationship may either be making sure that they have, we help to decrease the turnover or help them with whatever they may need, because if they bounce and we can't force them to stay, we up shit's creek, basically. So is that what you're saying?
Hospital goes under.
Right. The hospital.
Essentially, it's a business. It's a business, right?
Right. Because here's my thing. My thing is, let's say, okay, it's 1,000 doctors. And let's say all of them are like, I don't want to, or some of them, I should say, are not like, they're like, I don't really want to do locums. I like my little job. I like my little benefits. I like knowing that, I don't have to pay for my health insurance out of pocket and go on to the, healthcare marketplace. And I just like all my benefits. Okay, that's fine. You don't need all 1,000 doctors to do that. What you need is some measure of a tipping point for, even if it were 400 doctors, less than half of the 1,000, to say, we out unless you give us an independently contracted relationship. Because New York City will be hard pressed to find 400 doctors all at once
To fill those
to
spots.
come in and do locums, right? Like on their own. So if you have 400 doctors who say, listen,
but
we're
if you
willing
did,
to
but
stay.
if you did that, it would break there wouldn't be a need for a union.
But that's what she said earlier. She said there wouldn't be a need for a union if you guys functioned this way.
Right.
Yeah,
That's what I'm
the
saying.
one
If
thing-
you want
the
to
one
treat
thing that I'm
people like
interested-
blue collar, they'll act blue collar.
The one thing that I'm very interested in is the scenario that Kiara brought in, which is, let's say you work in there as a locums. What do you do in that situation, right? Let's say that the situation is shitty. You're working there, and a lot of times what happens, folks, is locums come in and they can handle shitty situations because they know they don't have to be there forever. They're like, look, I'll work my 2 weeks and then I'm out, or I'll work a week and then I'm in and I'm out. See y'all later, and you come back in. It's like, okay, I can handle this, but it's only for a short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
But then what happens when you're there? For example, Dr. Renee, let's say you work in there at this facility and you're like, your colleagues who happen to be employed, they're like, listen, we on like January 13th, we striking, we doing this, we doing our Nat Turner thing, what you doing? What, you coming with us? What you gonna say?
I'm not.
She said no.
No. And I'll tell you why. Why
You
y'all
said the
laughing?
Nat Turner
the way
thing. I
you
was like,
said it. But I see your
doing
point. I
Nat
see where
Turner
your
thing
thought
on-
process is, because it's like, no, I'm not, because you're an independent contractor. You still have to get paid.
It's not even that. It's not that. But it's not even that. The question that I would have for them is, why do you think I'm here? I'm here because you have.
Here we go with her whole
It's true. Why do you think
Don't
I'm
bend
here?
the spoon.
I'm here
Bend
because
around the spoon. This ain't the Matrix, Renee.
There is no spoon.
There is no spoon?
Listen.
What are you talking about?
Listen, I'm here because you do have these shitty conditions. I'm here because you're burnt out. I'm here because your colleague is on maternity leave.
Right.
I'm here because your other colleague, he went on vacation. I'm here because of, you guys had somebody who quit and now that's why I'm here. I'm here because of the same reasons that you want to strike. And frankly, especially if I've been here for a long period of time, guess what? That only says to me that your only option right now is to strike, because they're never going to fix this problem. They're just going to keep calling me in. So yeah,
So, would
go
you
out
to a
and strike.
place-
I encourage it. I encourage it. Go out and strike.
In the meantime, you're gonna be filling out your timesheet. I got you.
In the meantime, I'll be filling out my time sheet
So,
and collecting my check with its taxes not taken out.
okay, my question is, would you ever go to a place where you feel like the situation is not safe for patients? Like you get there, like let's say like they tell you, hey, this is X, Y, and Z. This is what you're gonna be doing. You get there, you find out that like the doctors are burnt out, they don't have assistants, blah blah blah. But ultimately, you see that care is at risk. What would you do in that situation? Do you still work there, or would you leave?
So there was a hospital at one point. This is kind of during COVID though, that I felt like, I don't know if this is a sustainable situation for me. You remember when I would tell you like, yeah, there was one hospital. I started going to like 3 different hospitals the summer of COVID. And there was one hospital. I was new to this hospital. And it took me like 2 or 3 times going there to realize something's not really right here. And then I felt like I would have a lot of liability. So the answer is actually no. I'm not going to put my livelihood on the line for a hospital whose system is going to bite me in the butt.
Right, I see.
Because
So you
it's
would
the
leave.
system that's going to bite me in the butt, but I'm the one whose butt is going to get bitten, because that hospital is going to keep standing. My license might not.
So that would be your deal breaker right there.
That would be
feel
a deal
like
breaker for me. If
patient
I
care
went
is at
somewhere and
risk.
I was like, oh, this is what y'all doing to patients, and y'all have no recourse to correct this, I'm not putting my livelihood on the line. And if there are any other doctors who are working there who are employed, I would be like, listen, they asked why you don't come back. I'd be like, because y'all crazy and you want to put your livelihood on the line, that's fine, but I'm not going to do that. Absolutely
Yeah,
not.
I think if I was in that situation where I was working at a hospital as a locums and I knew that the doctors were going to strike, I would say, hey, I support you guys. I mean, I there's nothing for me to strike about.
Just give the verdict, Nee. What would you do?
I'd still be working there. Yeah, I'd still be
Don't
working
say
there,
that.
unless I
Oh, I
knew.
support you. I this, that, and the other. It's not you. It's me. Just say what you gotta say.
All the cliches.
You need me to take your
Right.
call? You need me to take your call? Let me take your call, yo. Let me take your call. Let me take your call. But like, no, I mean, but for
All
me,
scratchy.
Do you know why you're here?
I'm here for the same reason you is, man. I want some crack.
that's my like Ashley Larry. Like, listen, come on, yo, let me get your call.
Your call, yo.
But I do think I agree with you. I do think that as if you are locums, like this is a situation where, listen, like if you don't like it there or if it's a shitty conditions, you can always just be like, I'm not going to work here anymore. I'm going to leave. If you decide to continue to work there, then you know it's temporary. You get in, you get out, and go from there. So for me, I would continue working there even if they were striking. But my deal breaker, and that's why I brought up to you, is my deal breaker is always if patient care or if my safety is at risk, then it's time for me to go. Or it's just a place I just don't want to be at anymore. It's time for me to go. But I applaud them. I applaud them for, fighting for what's very important, which is, their sanity as well as the patient care and so forth. And, if you guys don't know, like medicine, I feel like there's a demarcation line. Like once you cross over the Hudson River, like medicine in New York is different than medicine
Anywhere else.
where else. You guys don't, like, people don't understand like the concept of like getting a patient out to go to rehab. Like, where are you taking them? Like, right, like this New York is just so like inundated. Like you could be at a shopping, like at a bodega, and right next to it is like a rehab facility. Like everything in New York is just different, right? Let me get a big egg and cheese.
Isn't New York getting like
rehab.
congestion tolls now because of how congested it is?
Started yesterday on Sunday.
Yo, $9 to go below 60th Street, in addition to what the toll was before.
Yeah.
But that's two, right? There's 2 different price points. There's just like the regular and then there's the easy pass.
Yo, it's crazy. there's always a difference between Easy Pass and regular, right? They always, because they want everybody to take Easy Pass, so they'll try to give you a discount to get you onto Easy Pass, and then you get charged more if you just pay by cash. But you're right. So there's two different fees. But in addition to what the current fees are, if you are going into New York below the 60th Street between 5 in the morning and like 9 p.m.
9
or
at
something like that,
night.
9 at night below 60th Street. So we're talking about like from the Holland Tunnel, all the way up to like Midtown, right? If you're going from New York to from New Jersey into there, or if you're just traveling into that area, they're going to be those little scanners that are scanning you, looking at your license plate and sending you $9 to come in. And that's crazy. And from a hospital standpoint, it's crazy. Think about everybody from New Jersey who needs to go to a hospital. They get their health care in New York, right? People who live in Fort Lee or who live in, right across the river, and they got to go get their health care below 60th Street. They're going to get taxed crazy.
But yes, but I'm looking it up now. It says you can use toll exempt highways like the FDR Drive or the West Side Highway. So that means that if you really wanted to avoid it, you basically have to take the long route.
Yes.
Yeah. And FDR Drive, there's never any traffic on there or anything.
Imagine how crazy the George Washington Bridge is going to be now.
It really doesn't matter where you are in New York, though.
Imagine how crazy the George Washington Bridge is going to be now. Imagine how crazy it is going to be. So everybody's going to go to George Washington. They're going to drive a little bit above Midtown, and they're going to park their car there, and they're going to take the train in. Yeah. It's crazy.
Well, on the plus side, though, right? It says that the transport for London is saying that you only need to pay once, no matter how many times you drive in and out of the congestion charge zone on the same day.
Yeah. I guess
I don't know. I guess we'll see what happens, right?
Yeah, they're saying that they need the money to help pay for rebuilding roads and a whole bunch of different things. We'll see.
Well,
but
it's funny. They're doing congestion pricing, but if you look out all over, like if you're on the highway in New York, when you look out, all you see are cranes building more and more apartment complexes. I'm like,
you're being
so you're trying to
for living
congestion in driving, but you're increasing congestion in the living situation. I don't get it. Like,
You're inviting more people in. I think what's going to happen is people are going to get tired of it eventually and start branching out to other states.
Well, that's already happening, right?
That's happening in
California. You see that in California. You see that in, people moving from California to Nevada, or people leaving and going to Texas. I think you definitely see that in New York. But I think what ends up happening is New York is a land of haves and have-nots, right? Eventually, it's just going to be a land of haves. If you can live in New York, you can afford $4,000 a month rent, or you have like a high rise that you own, and there's not going to be a go-between anymore, right? So you're really rich or you're really poor.
Yeah.
And people are already moving to Jersey for that. People are already moving to Connecticut and other places, so the thing that's crazy though is like the news and the narratives really drive like the public sentiment on this too, because the whole point is to drive people to start using public transportation.
Right.
But if you guys have been paying attention with what's been going on in New York and public transportation, like we're talking about like earlier last week or late last week, a gentleman got pushed in front of a train, right? And then a week before that, or 2 weeks before that, a woman was sleeping on a train and she got set on fire. So it's just like there's a lot of stuff going on. I mean, New York,
like 1980.
What's crazy is that we're talking about these things, and as New Yorkers, that's the norm. Like these things, these things are the only reason they're getting out there is because of social media and cameras and whatnot, technology. But that's the norm in New York. There's always something happening. There's always something crazy. Like you walk down the street and you see like 7 crazies in a block. Like you never know what you're gonna get that day, but it's the norm. Like it's like, oh shit, she's on fire, and then it's like, okay, and then you go on about your day. You get on the train and you just move along.
I think the crazy thing, with that story, that I think there were people there that, people could have tried to put her out. I think, right, and I don't know. That part is a very difficult one, because I think that's an extreme one, right? Like you don't really see people get put on fire there, but you see, you'll see like scuffles or, I mean, you have millions
I
of
mean,
people or
people
hundreds
getting
of
pushed
thousands
on
of
the
people.
train was like the norm, especially in the 80s. In the
But I
80s,
think
people
that
getting pushed on the train
I
a
think
lot.
that's
Actually,
I think the whole fire thing. I think the whole yes, as someone who's looking from the outside looking in, it's like, yeah, somebody could have put her out. However, we don't know how hot the fire was. The guy was still there
that's the other thing.
when she was lit on fire. He was fanning the flame. So you also have to think at this point, it's about preservation,
safe for me?
self-preservation. Yeah. So if I go
No.
put her out, am I next?
Wait, you talking about the guy who did it
Yeah,
The guy who did
was
it
fanning her
there, he was fanning her flames.
to make
to
it
make it
worse?
hotter.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, he was caught, thankfully, but
Yeah.
yeah, it was completely unprovoked. And that's the scariest part is that you're sitting there minding your business and completely unprovoked. Stuff like that happens all the time in New York.
Yeah. I 20 years ago, if you asked me, while I was in medical school, is there a chance that you won't end up going to practice in New York? I would have thought you were crazy because I'm like, I'm going to New York or I'm going to Jersey. I'm going to practice there and that's where I'm from. And I would have never thought that I'd be practicing, doing what I'm doing, in different parts of the country, mainly because I don't want to practice in New York. Nope. I don't want to practice in New York City. I don't want to live in, there was an opportunity to do.
I decided long ago I wasn't going to work in New York no more.
Breaking out in the song.
See, I remember Renee, I was like, yo, there's this job in Brooklyn. It's a trauma position. The pay is okay. And she, like, I didn't even get the chance to finish. She was like,
I
was like, what? But I was like,
leave you. It's over.
I was like, we get to live in your home. We get
No.
in Park Slope.
No.
We get to be, in a nice area.
Renee's like, yo, I left there. I don't want to go back. I left.
And
Why
no,
would
it
I
wasn't nobody from Park Slope. You thought you was going to slip that in there, okay? Nobody from Park Slope. It's New York, baby.
Audrey,
Let me tell you
just
something.
so you don't know, there's really nice areas of Brooklyn, and that's where
I love Brooklyn, but I love it in memory. I love it in memory. It was a great childhood. It was a great upbringing, but I was not in life where I am now. And it worked for me as a child, as a teenager, as a young adult. It worked for me. But now, as a total grown woman with a husband and kids, it just doesn't. As
do you
a
ever
physician,
feel like
definitely
you
doesn't.
abandoned your neighborhood? Do you ever feel like
No.
you abandoned your neighborhood? I sometimes feel like I'm like, man, like
We're there. We're in your neighborhood all the time.
I know, but
I know. But I don't live there.
Live there.
but y'all, do you guys know what I'm talking about? Like,
No, absolutely not. I left for a reason.
we left, but there's just like that neighborhood could use more doctors that look like you, right?
Listen, but here's the problem. Here's the problem, right? I know that my neighborhood could use more doctors that look like me? Yes. But the problem is that no matter how many doctors I were to bring into that neighborhood, let's say I brought the whole of SNMA with me to East New York, okay? The problem is that it has to be sustainable for everyone there. It's not sustainable for the people who live there. It's going to be sustainable for me. Like it's not. So how am I going to bring quality care? This is why the people are striking. This is why the doctors are striking, because they want to take care of those neighborhoods, but they can't. They literally can't. The doctors are suffering. The patients are suffering. The community is suffering.
So you're
everybody's suffering.
You're saying you would go there and you would basically chase your tail, like
exactly. I'd go there and chase my tail.
Do you think that'd be symbolic? Do you think that still would be symbolic, so that maybe you're not the person who's going to come and break that cycle, but you would inspire somebody else to come and either join you or join the fight, and then eventually you guys get to a point where people are coming back to the neighborhood. And do you know what I'm saying? Is that wishful thinking on my part?
If
I'll be honest with you, I struggle with that. I'm like, man, like, like the hospital in my neighborhood, it closed and now everybody goes to Newark Beth Israel. But there was a hospital in Irvington that, you know, treated my grandmother when she came from Ghana, and treated, you know, when I broke my finger, you know, I went there. That was the nice local hospital, a beautiful local hospital that they just shut down and then shifted everybody to Newark. But, you know, sometimes I feel like, man, like, did I abandon this neighborhood? Because, you know, it's tough. It's a tough thing. So
I think at the point at which I am now in my life, I would not be able to do that. If I were younger, single, then yeah, you know, I think I could hit the ground and struggle a little bit. But now
only
I'm
11
at the
years
point
ago.
in my life where I don't have room for that in my life right now. I just don't.
What was that comment you made me?
I said that was only 11 years ago that you were single.
11 years goes by fast.
Okay.
Audrey, do you understand what we're talking about? You know, like, yeah.
There's a lot. There's a lot in New York things.
I mean,
My brother-in-law stays in New York, Brooklyn, so I know he complains a lot.
Where in Brooklyn is he?
I don't know where, but I know he's in Brooklyn, so
Okay.
Tell him there are lots of other places he can go.
he
but
did
not
buy a
North
house.
Carolina.
Not North Carolina. Stay in Brooklyn if you come down here.
But I mean, here's my question also though, right? We do international medical missions, and we always talk about like brain drain, right? We always talk about brain drain and how so many doctors who were trained, you know, educated and trained internationally, they come to the US to practice, right? Because there are certain conditions that it's just like, how much more will I struggle? How much more can I actually how much more frustration can I put up with?
That's different,
Right.
though. I'll tell you why that's different. Because in those type of situations, particularly, you know, if you, depending on which country you go for, but in those situations, the country has put in a significant amount of investment in that person, right? The training from after college, from medical school to residency, and even to some house officership. The country in general has invested in that person. So there's a certain level of responsibility, or there's a certain level of, they have to pay back that stuff. And then when they leave, it's like, it really is a big deal in these countries, right? It comes down to, we talk about this, I don't know if you guys have heard about this, Audrey and Kiara, of in the United States, what's really taking care of patients? Is it the system, or is it an individual doctor, right? Whereas if you go to, like, you know, certain places that are
I just want you to know you're making my point, but go ahead.
in other parts of the world, you know, is there really even a system to take care of people, or is it more of the individualized doctor that's making the difference, right? So in this situation where, like, you have like an entire country that's putting significant amount of investment into individual providers, when they leave, that leaves a huge hole, particularly if you have a doctor that's taking care of maybe, you know, 10,000, you know, 20,000, 50,000 people and stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but you beautifully, probably better than me, made my point. Beautifully made my point, right? Is that, you know, part of the reason that we do medical missions is because we are going back to the places where people essentially left because they were suffering. They were burnt out. They were, you know, it was not a sustainable situation for them. Whereas in the United States, you probably will never see a medical mission in Brooklyn, New York, right? Because I don't want to say there is no shortage, because there's always a shortage in New York, but not to the extent of, you know, a shortage of where you would do an international medical mission, right? There are places that people can go, whether it be 45 minutes away, 20 minutes away. There are places that people can go, and you are most definitely going to find a doctor there. So even if you brought every single doctor in the United States to all of the underserved areas, you know, that there are, like, it's you're not going to have that same level of, I guess, abandonment in, in another country as you are, in the United States. I don't
have
know.
two questions based on what you just
Go ahead,
said.
go ahead.
One, what happens when you have to come back from those medical missions? Who continues the care?
That's a big deal. That's a big deal. Like that, like a lot of missions, like they don't have an answer for that. Like they come in, they set up a place to work. They take care of people for a select period of time, 1 to 2 weeks, and then they leave. And I think that that's a big disservice, right? Because if you do a procedure on a patient in these medical missions and they have a complication, who's going to follow up with these patients? So that is a big deal, that if you're starting a medical mission, even more so than just like, how do we start a medical mission? It's like, okay, if we start a medical mission, who's going to even follow up on these patients? Like that's the first thought. If we do this, who's going to follow up with these patients? So I think that can be a big problem. So it really boils down to like, you always have to make sure that like you are having the community buy-in, and you're also having the buy-in from the local physicians who are willing to be a part of the mission, as well as kind of do the yeoman's work afterwards, right? Like if you do some type of crazy esoteric operation that they can't do in that country because of just lack of resources, well, then when you leave, like those physicians need to know how to handle the complications of that esoteric surgery also. So that requires like a really good working relationship, and requires trust. It requires
Willingness.
time to say, what'd you say?
Willingness.
And stuff, and meeting people in the middle. And that's one
the
of the
case with
hardest
our
parts.
medical missions. We work
the hardest
alongside the
part.
doctors.
Yeah.
So we work alongside the doctors, in-country doctors. And so all of our patients have continuity of care. But like Nee said, it depends on the organization that you go with. And that's why you have to determine exactly how much care are you going to give to a patient. Because in trying to decrease someone's suffering, you could actually increase it upon your exit. If someone has a complication, it's like, well,
Okay.
they were suffering before, but now they're suffering in a very different way. And no one can take care of them.
So then my second question is, for these medical missions, can you do them being working in a hospital, like being, I guess, a regular doctor versus a locums doctor?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Most of the doctors that come with, you mean if you're an employed doctor in the United States?
Yes.
Yeah. Most of the doctors that go on the mission are employed docs.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We did it as employed docs.
Yeah.
We also did it as locums, but we did it as employed docs.
Yeah.
Which do you prefer?
I prefer, I just always prefer to be locums and stuff.
Yeah.
But when you are, for me, yeah, when like I had to really let it be known, guys, like in the beginning of the year, in August, which is 7 months, 8 months from now, I need 2 weeks off to go and do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And I had to keep reminding them over and over and over again, because you don't control your schedule, right? Someone every month is making a schedule for you. And a lot of times you get that schedule at the end of the previous month, right? So like sometimes in July, when August comes out, it's like, guys, I told you, like I need 2 weeks in a row off so I can go to Ghana. Like this happened a couple of times. Like I don't know why, like I told you this, and luckily my partners were very like, oh yeah, we got to make sure that occurs. But that could be a problem. Getting 2 weeks off in a row as an employed doc could be tough, I think.
So guys, all this locums course has gotten Kiara in the mood to talk about locums.
I'm not allowed to talk about it, guys.
To talk about our locums course. And as you guys know, we've been kind of talking about having this locums course for a while. We have a wait list. The wait list, if you go to the link below, you can sign up for our freebie. It'll send you kind of our freebie about, it'll tell you something very interesting about locums, but it will also allow us to have your email, your information to be able to send out to you, so that once we are taking individuals for the course, and seats are going to be limited, that you will be the first to know. So go ahead and click that link, give us your information, get that freebie, and be on the list to be able to get info on the course.
So quite a few, we have a lot of people who actually have been signing up for that because I think
Mhm.
a lot of people are very interested in learning some of the basics of locums.
What can they learn from the course, though? What are they getting out of it?
Renee, go ahead. I'm not
So Renee, the teacher.
guys, I've been put on an embargo.
Get out of here. Professor Renee. So in the course, you're going to learn kind of some of the things that we've been talking about, over the course of the podcast. But things like, who does locums, why do locums, how you can do locums. We'll also teach you and go through the process of getting your first locums gig or optimizing, if you're already doing locums, optimizing how you can get the gigs that really work for you, negotiating those gigs for yourself, setting your schedule, and really just kind of building, building a portfolio of assignments that will allow you to kind of live the life that you want without burnout, without having to worry about your schedule, like we just talked about, and just knowing what your deal breakers are, right? We all have deal breakers, and sometimes we kind of try to push past those. And with locums, you don't have to. Something's a deal breaker, you check the deuces and you keep it moving until you find a gig that you want. But I think the locums course is going to be a nice way for those of you who haven't done locums before, to really understand the nooks and crannies, the meat and potatoes of doing locums, especially if you want to do locums as a full-time gig. But even if you want to do locums kind of part-time or on the side, just to dip your little pinky toe in the locums pool, this course is a great way to be able to do that.
Listen, if you're trying to be on your own, if you're trying to
I
work on
thought you
your
were an
own,
embargo.
and you not and you're not trying to, if you don't want to be employed anymore, this is a great course to get you started with doing locums. Leave it at that. I think a lot of people feel like they don't know enough information. There's too much information. They stick their head in the sand. This course will help uncover all of that stuff for you so that you can really get started, even doing this part-time on the side, which is what we did. And then eventually, if you want to, you can always transition with the knowledge that you'll learn in this course to transition to doing locums on your own also. So I think it's a really great course. We put a lot of work into it. And we've been doing this for locums for over 12 years, so we know what we're talking about. Real quick, before we end this episode, guys, I just want to very quickly, in 5 minutes or less, guys, I just really want to know, what is the outlook for you guys for 2025? I have my outlook, so I'll give you guys an opportunity to say, what is the New Year's resolution? What is the theme of 2025 for you guys individually? So why don't we start with Kiara? What's your theme for 2025?
All right. I'm over here on my screen, though.
Kiara?
I actually decided not to do any resolutions this year.
Really?
Yeah.
Me, turn around. That's why y'all gotta be watching on YouTube to see these shenanigans.
Go ahead. So why no New Year's resolution or no theme for the year?
I feel like it's a lot of pressure to meet the resolution. And then if you don't do it by the end of the year, you're basically just beating yourself up over it. What I am aiming for is consistency, as far as like working out. So last year, I actually lost 20 pounds from beginning to end. I know. And I feel a lot better. But I didn't do it with the intention of like, I need to reach this by the end of the year. It was more like, oh, I want to start working out more consistently. And whatever I lose. Whatever I don't, just to feel better. This year, I would like to keep that up and maybe read more. But I'm not setting like a number to that, if that makes sense. Like, I'm not like, I want to read 50 books by the end of the year, because if I don't meet 50, I'm like, well, you kind of suck.
I see what you're saying. So you want to just be consistent. You don't want to set a number that will disappoint later on. You just want to just be consistent and be a reader.
Oh, and I want to travel. I got my passport. It's in the mail. But this year I plan to travel, so just a heads up.
Kiara going on strike.
Don't be leaving us. I was about to say, I was like, Kiara, come on now. We need you. Come on, yo. Come on, yo. Come on. All right. Audrey.
Oh, I'm the one below. Okay. You're also below me on my end.
Oh, really?
So for the new year, I only have one resolution, which is I know what I already want, but so I'm just like, for example, I need to lose weight. I need to, work hard more. Like you already know what you need to do, so just why not do it? So that's my only resolution. You already know what you need to do, but why are you not actualizing? Like why are you not doing it? So I plan on like answering that question throughout the year. So go ahead and do it. And also travel. Kiara, we're on the same.
As long as you don't come here, you're good.
Don't go to North Carolina.
I want to travel outside the country at least once this year or twice. And yeah, I have like memories because you're not getting any younger. I don't have any children yet. So yeah. And also this year I wanna like, I don't know, just be intentional with many things in my life, including like romantic relationships. I just wanna be intentional with so many things because yeah. So I look forward to like answering the question. You already know what you want for yourself to be a better person. So why not? Why are you not doing it? So I'll keep doing things to, answer the question. So yeah, that's me for 2025. Yeah.
All right, I guess it's Renee's turn.
This year I want to have another baby. Look at. Man, you out your mind. I don't have no more babies.
I think biology said they just
Shut up, Nee. Anyway. No, this year I'm kind of like with you guys. I just want to become more physically active. We'll start there. Just more physically active. So that's one. Two, I'd like to, and we've already kind of started, but I would like to create spaces more intentionally. So we're working on our living room now. And before, where our kids were younger and they destroyed everything, not that they don't still destroy things, but they're older. I'd like to kind of be more intentional about the spaces that we create in the house, so that I can just feel better.
In your house? Your new house?
In the new house. In our old new house.
You're making your house a home.
Yes. That's essentially what I'd like to do. Start by, making the house a home. So there are 3 spaces that I'd like to work on this year, to be able to just make it more homey, cozy, and just more inviting and feel like, okay, I'm not renting this place anymore. We are now living here. So, yeah.
All right. Me, it's all you now.
Yeah. So for me, subtraction and quality over quantity. So I think that for me, 2025 is going to be a year of me basically cutting and chopping things that, I don't need. I think I've accumulated a lot of
Cutting and chopping.
things. Huh?
Who are you cutting and chopping?
There's a lot of subscriptions and a lot of
Why I gotta be a who, not a what?
a lot of people.
A lot of people.
There's a lot of things that I just want to just cut out so I could be hyper focused on what I do really good at. And I think that over the years, as I started in the beginning of the show, over the years, we've just kind of taken on more and more things that we want to do as fun. And I think we've become a jack of trades. And I think it's time to become masters of certain types of activities that we do, whether that's real estate, podcasting, or whatever that may be. So my goal this year is to cut the frivolous stuff out, really focus on, even with the podcast, like quality, as opposed to quantity. and really focus on putting out great episodes and really focus on, getting Docs Outside the Box back to being the best podcast out there for medical professionals. So,
All right.
all right, y'all.
We got this.
We got this. Thank you very much. And listen, we'll catch you guys on another episode of Docs Outside the Box. You know how to get in touch with us. All of the stuff to get in touch with us on our socials, as well as to text us or send us messages, is below in the show descriptions or in the show notes on your podcast app, whatever you're listening to. All right. We'll catch you guys on the next episode, y'all. Peace.
Peace.